The ability to patch a game has been a thing more or less since the dawn of digital distribution. Heck, some of you watching this video may not even remember a time that patching games wasn't a thing, and I gotta say, your existence is making me feel old. Gonna be the cantankerous old man here and say that I remember a time when games just worked. Oh sure, you like Cyberpunk 2077 now, but if patching wasn't a thing, then that game would be remembered as nothing but the broken mess it was in 2020. Yeah, sorry, I'm not gonna let that one go. I know what I played in 2020. Why wasn't it working on launch, CD Projekt? I wanted the game to work now! But okay, I am being a little facetious. Yes, I would have preferred the game launched working out of the box, but I am glad they ultimately fixed the game. Stories like Cyberpunk's, while certainly not ideal, is ultimately a positive story, and that same opportunity to improve a game over time extends to indie developers such as myself, too. Hopefully without the disastrous launch. I'm never letting that go! But with that said, while it's great that developers now have the opportunity to improve their games after launch, I also feel that, at least from a solo developer's perspective, patching a game can kinda suck. So I thought I'd talk about that using the last few patches I did for my own game's demo to illustrate my point. Of course, do keep in mind that this is merely my opinion, and said opinion is from the perspective of a solo developer, and is not at all meant to represent how developers across the industry feel about patching games. With that said, hi, my name is Lance, aka Infinite Level, and I'm making a psychological horror game titled What Hides in Dreams, Where Death Leaves Scars. For this devlog, I'm talking about the process of patching my game's demo, and why it's a bit of an annoying but necessary task. To begin, let me walk you through the demo for What Hides in Dreams and its patch history. Very basically, the demo launched with 3 levels, with each level taking place in a unique environment and each containing their own unique puzzles, items, and a specialized monster encounter. Despite my prior playtesting, the demo's launch revealed a handful of major issues. Some were technical problems like the machine monster doing a weird little stutter once he got near the player, or disappearing items when reloading a save. But then there were arguably more severe problems with the game's very design. It was in general too difficult of a game, and players were getting lost in the not fun way. Oh yes, despite my whining earlier about wishing games would just work at launch, here I am telling you that my demo was a bit rough around the edges. I mean, not like Cyberpunk rough, but rougher than I would have liked. Fortunately, this is just a demo, and demos ultimately have 2 purposes: to attract potential buyers, and to get some delicious, unfiltered feedback. Opinions. From those opinions, it was quite clear that my game needed some work. So the first patch focused on lowering the game's overall difficulty by adjusting some monster stats like movement speed, as well as better communicating the unique details of a given monster. The second patch had a similar focus, with a brand new game mechanic introduced to help players find key items. The third, and at time of writing, current version is a bit less exciting, but it did bring some improvements to monster behavior and made hiding places much more useful to the player, while also bringing some much needed performance improvements to the museum level. Now, it should hopefully go without saying that the ability to patch my demo has made for a much better demo overall, not to mention a better eventual full game than I would have otherwise had, because don't forget, these fixes do go in the finished product too. Without the ability to update the What Hides in Dreams demo, a lot of problems would still persist in said demo, and you'd still have to square off against a monster who both knows where you are at all times and moves fairly quickly. Yeah, I don't know why I did that. It is a genuinely good feeling to put out some fixes knowing it will make a lot of people's experience with the game better. And as I mentioned, releasing the demo lets me find issues to fix in the full release, so come launch day, that'll be fewer bugs and glitches to worry about. Instead of a Mount Everest-sized pile of problems, I'll only have to deal with a slightly smaller than Mount Everest-sized pile of problems. I am about to groan about why I don't like the patch process, but if you take one thing away from this video, it's that despite how annoying patching a game can be, it's definitely better than the alternative. But okay, I'm gonna complain about the patch process now. First annoyance with patching games as a developer is that for every problem that's fixed, there's potential to create new problems. My fellow coders of course know the old adage, 99 little bugs in the code, take one down, patch it around, 127 little bugs in the code. For those of you who aren't coders, that may sound like a weird joke, but if you're a programmer, I probably just made you relive some traumatic experience. Heck, even in my case, you can pretty blatantly see how some of my patches would break save data in a way that I just didn't know how to correct. Thank God it's a demo that has these problems, because if the full game had stuff like this happen when a patch occurred, the people would riot. So yeah, while it may seem counterintuitive that fixing problems creates new problems, the fact is that it is very likely to happen whenever you go about fixing things. It's for that reason that I try not to touch my games too much after release, because the last thing I need to do is fill myself with dread wondering in what ways am I about to break my game. Of course, there is an easy solution to that problem too. Playtest the heck out of the game, which I do, and that's thankfully paid off in the past, but those hours playing through the game trying to break it sure do add up fast. It's a very time-consuming process. Problem number 2. Working on patching something takes away from doing the fun part of game dev, the actual content creation. This is especially true in the case of patching a demo, when you could be spending that time making the rest of the game. But even after a game is released and is for all intents and purposes done, patches can keep you coming back to a project that you're kind of over when you really want to be working on the shiny new thing. And look, as I said earlier, making the experience for your players better is never a bad thing. But it's hard to deny that it isn't exactly tickling the creative side of my brain. It's sort of like cleaning a toilet, which is a very unfortunate way of describing my own game, I'm aware, but bear with me. Yes, you should clean your toilet. It simply must be done. But you so badly want to get back to working on that cool painting project you started, you know? I feel this analogy is a bit crappy. Much like the toilet. But I'm sleep deprived thanks to a baby, so this is the best I'm going to come up with, I think. Or maybe I'll just patch in a better analogy later. And for our third problem, sometimes a problem is just annoying to fix. And I know how lazy that makes me sound, but don't act like you can't empathize. We've all had those times where you're faced with a problem that you're trying to solve, it needs to be solved, but it's extremely annoying. Much like clogged toilets, for example. Why am I suddenly fixated on toilet analogies? Take this bug fix I did in my game's last patch. Office. Fixed bug where escape outcome could occasionally not be registered. Sounds simple enough, but you have no idea how much this problem was driving me mad. Pay attention to the wording of that note. I said the problem happened occasionally, as in not consistently. And there's very few things in game dev that are worse than a bug that you don't know how to reliably replicate. I was bashing my head against my desk trying to figure this one out. And you know what's worse? It wasn't even originally on my to-do list. I discovered this problem as I was finalizing the patch, and it ended up tacking on a whole extra day's worth of work. How? Well, first, you gotta find the problem, which as I said was not easy to do since the problem didn't occur consistently. Then, of course, you put in the fix, and then you have to trigger the escape outcome in this level several times to make sure it never happens again. If you find your fix didn't work, well, put in a new one and try again. I'm of course glad the problem got taken care of in the end, but gee whiz, I could have done without the frustration. I'm sure if I sat here long enough, I could come up with more reasons why patching games is such an aggravating process, but I think I've sufficiently made my point. And I want to emphasize again, disliking the process doesn't mean I don't see the value in it. It is ultimately a net positive that games are allowed to better themselves with a little added time. That does come with some caveats, of course. It's no secret that some developers, or rather, their publishers, rely a little too hard on upcoming patches to justify an earlier release date. But generally speaking, it is a good thing. But boy howdy, patches can be a thorn in my side, and while I can only speak for myself, I am willing to bet other devs feel the same. But hey, YouTube has a comment system. Maybe if you're a developer, you can give your perspective. Other perspectives are nice. And if you're not a developer, well, feel free to discuss in the comments anyway. This is the internet. I know you have an opinion. With that, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this devlog, then of course a like and subscribe is very much appreciated. And if you've been watching this and thinking my game looks pretty neat, then I would love it if you head on over to Steam and wishlist What Hides in Dreams. Wishlists are how Steam gauges an interest in a game and can help get the game in front of more people. Plus, you'll get an email notification the moment the game releases. Link is in the description below. Thanks again for watching, have a most excellent day, and until next time.